Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. We have our current issues panel with us today, a regular feature here on our show. And today we are covering many issues which you may have seen in the news headlines lately. We're going to discuss Trudeau's new truck tax and how that will impact Canadians. Elon Musk's attempt to take over Twitter, very exciting. We'll talk about the new COVID vax, Novavax, which some are suggesting might be preferable to the new mRNA vaccines for those of you who have yet to get the jab or maybe don't want to get the jab. We'll also discuss the Ottawa School Board bringing back mandatory masking in schools, even though the province dropped the mandates. And we'll also explore why there is a sudden surge of female inmates becoming pregnant in an all-female prison in New Jersey. Lots to discuss indeed, and returning now to help me unpack it all are political commentators Brock Stephenson and Hannah Salamon-Vegh. Welcome. Let's dive right in and unpack these topics. We'll start with the Trudeau truck tax. Brock, maybe you could share, what does this new tax mean for Canadians?
The Trudeau truck tax, which has a terrible name, is more money out of Canadians' pockets. If you have a truck, you're going to be the first one to pay. Eventually, I assume they'll go after everyone that doesn't have an electric vehicle. The Trudeau Liberals don't understand there's only one taxpayer, and there's a limit of how much money you can take out of a working person's pocket and put into the hands of those that live off the government that the Trudeau Liberals depend on for their votes. I think it's never enough for the Trudeau Liberals of how much they can take out of people's pocket, and Environment Minister Guilbeault is waging a cultural war over those that work in the resource sector in our country.
So Hannah, when I look at the numbers, so if you own a F-150, which is I think the most popular pickup truck that's sold, it's $1,000 tax on the purchase of that new car. If you own a heavy-duty pickup, and so those would be pickup trucks that haul perhaps construction materials. If you're a farmer, perhaps you haul some livestock with trailers, with these kinds of more heavy-duty pickup trucks. $4,000, that's a huge, huge tax. I should also note that there already is an existing tax on large SUVs. What do you think the impact will be to Canadians on this, Hannah?
The impact is going to be very damaging, because not only is it going to be the individual people who buy these pickup trucks who are going to have to pay these extra taxes, and I'm not sure from the report whether it's going to be on top of the regular 13% that you have to pay, regardless of whether you buy a new or used vehicle every single time. But when we think of the main people who use these types of pickup trucks, especially like the heavy duty ones, these are farmers, these are people who are growing our food. These are people who are fueling our economy. So that's just going to mean that food prices are going to go up, because they're not going to be the ones who can afford to eat these new taxes. It's going to have to be passed on to the consumer. And I don't understand why the Liberal government doesn't seem to understand basic economics. They're basically functioning as a parasite on the Canadian people, and parasites consume their hosts. Eventually, there's nothing left to eat anymore. We're being taxed to death. And instead of incentivizing people maybe to go more in the green energy route, that type of thing, like the Harper government was good at incentivizing companies and incentivizing people, they're just basically punishing people every way possible. And it pushes industry out of our country, which is going to further damage our economy.
Okay, it's an interesting point. Some people will say, well, rather than, as you mentioned, rather than tax, like a negative action, do a positive one and offer incentives. Now, I mean, I recall a few years ago, we used to have like what I used to call the Tesla incentive, where, you know, you bought a Tesla, bought a green energy vehicle, you got a certain amount of money back. But I'm thinking, if someone has the amount, has, you know, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 to buy a new Tesla, why are we giving them a tax break on that? You know, are green tax vehicle incentives the best route to go? You know, I suppose it's better than taxing other people if they don't buy the vehicle the government wants. Brock, what do you think about that?
The incentives have some benefit, but I guess from the Liberals' point of view, so does the tax. Their goal is to get people out of gas-burning vehicles, and they're going to push Canadians any way they can to shut down the oil and gas sector in this country.
So between the increase in carbon tax this year, which will hit businesses, hit farmers, hit us at the gas pumps, and now this new truck tax for, again, a lot of commercial trucks use these heavy-duty pickup trucks. This is a lot, and you're right, it will be passed down to the consumer. Hannah, we have 20 seconds left. Do you have any final thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it's right now it's in the proposal stage. So I'm sure it will go through though, because already, as you mentioned, there's high taxes on SUVs. But it's interesting, Justin Trudeau, when you see his group of cars going around Ottawa, they're all driving these big, black, massive SUVs. Are they paying those taxes too? Like, or do they think that it's just going to be on smaller people that are going to have to foot this bill?
Welcome back. We're with our current events panel, and joining me again is Hannah Salamon-Vegh and Brock Stephenson, commentators. So exciting news. I mean, it's been a kind of exciting news for the past few weeks with regard to Elon Musk. He is trying to take over, basically buy out Twitter. He offered $43 billion to buy Twitter. He's already a 9.2% owner in shares in that company. But he so far hasn't been successful. Brock, what's going on there?
He's trying to buy into a private club that doesn't really want him. The media elites think that he's a gadfly and sort of a pain, and he could put his $43 billion to great use for society. He's already done Tesla and trying to send people into space. I think $43 billion can go a long way elsewhere. Also, the future of internet messaging and conversation is moving away from the public sphere. People are moving towards group chats and moving towards messenger apps that protect their privacy. The problem with Twitter is it's out in the public and is dividing society left and right as people argue endlessly all day long.
So is that division that bad, though? I'm going to ask you, Brock, as a follow-up. Is division really that bad? I mean, people maybe had these interior opinions and now they're just voicing them publicly. What's wrong with that?
I think it leads to people being canceled. I think that's why quite a few on the right, older men in particular, are abandoning the platform. The vast majority of people never tweet, and I think that's part of the point Elon Musk is making, is that the most popular users don't tweet. It's a platform that's dying. He's trying to rejuvenate it and give it some life, but it's already losing advertisers. It's struggling to keep attention, and without Donald Trump as president of the United States, the daily urge for people to go on Twitter has declined.
So Hannah, let me ask you this. You know, when I see Twitter, I mean, it is, yes, it's publicly traded, but it's a private company. It's why should someone have to, there's been a lot of concern about censorship and free speech on Twitter, and I get that. I'm a big proponent of free speech, but is it our right, or is it the right of Elon Musk? Is it his prerogative? Is it his responsibility to go and police free speech in a private company like Twitter?
Well, I don't know if he actually intends to buy Twitter. Like, I mean, he seems very serious about it with, the statements he puts out and his desire to, buy, all the shares, everything like that. But at the same time, he's extremely wealthy, and he enjoys having fun with people, and at their own expense. So, I'm sure that he's well aware that the Twitter, board and the CEO and all that, they're not stupid, and they have many plans when situations like this come arise, when someone wants to own a huge percentage of the stock, or even buy over Twitter. I don't know if they've ever had this before, so they're kind of scrambling, and it's fun to watch it happen. But it's interesting to see so many left-wing people crying out saying, oh, there's no censorship online, and Twitter, they're not censoring people, that type of thing. Freedom of speech is not at stake. Whether they're the same people who say that we shouldn't be able to say what we desire and what we believe without facing repercussions. So yes, Twitter is a private company, but they still have to abide by certain laws. And that's, one of the huge issues right now with companies that get so big, and even Congress can't even control them or, moderate what happens in terms of censorship on their platform and that type of thing. So many of these people don't care about, the censorship happening on the platform, and they're more concerned about Elon Musk trying to open freedom of speech up for more people. Like, that's not the issue. The issue is the censorship that's happening right now.
So I guess, again, I'll let you have a chance to take a stab at this, Brock, but, hearing what you said, Hannah, that, like Congress can't control it, but why should Congress control it? Yes, sure, if Twitter's going around censoring, then wouldn't the fruits of that kind of censorship just be laid bare, that people say, well, you know what, I've had enough, I'm walking away, which is what is happening. So let them suffer a death. Let them suffer a slow death by 1,000 cuts if people are just going to walk away from that kind of, won't the market command what they want? Brock?
The government's been trying to regulate the internet since they discovered it was there. And I think that part of the problem is government doesn't know how to deal with big technology. Twitter is one of the biggest tech companies out there, and they're struggling to figure out what to do with it. They're concerned about free speech, particularly when it affects their free speech. But they're more concerned about how society is out of their control. And I think that's a bigger problem for government, that government no longer has the sway with the general public, and things like Twitter and other tech companies have a bigger impact on people's daily lives.
Well, I would argue that like companies like Facebook and Twitter, though, are working hand in hand with particular governments like the Biden government, and Democrats and stuff like that to influence election, to sway voters, to censor speech. So I don't think they're competing against each other in certain cases. Like right now, they're in many ways working hand in hand.
Wow. Well, I guess we're going to have to keep our eye on this and see what will happen. Vanguard stepped up and is now actually the majority shareholder. They have the biggest stake at 10.3%, but it looks like some pieces are being moved very quickly to kind of block Elon's, future moves. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. We'll be right back in just a few moments. Welcome back. We're picking up our current events panel, and some new issues have hit. One being that a school board in Ottawa is now basically bringing back a new rule forcing masking in the school, bringing back a mask mandate. And Ottawa, obviously being in Ontario doesn't have a mandate for masks any longer. So Hannah, I'll start with you. First of all, how can this school board go ahead and do this? If Ontario doesn't compel a mask mandate, why does the school board have the authority to do that?
Well, it's very interesting to see this happen. And, we're seeing it, though, at many universities and colleges still that are requiring masks. And they're appealing to the local health unit, saying the local health unit recommends, and they keep using the word recommends, it's never mandates, that they continue with masking. So I understand that private businesses can still continue to require the vaccine passport or masks if they desire. But when it comes to universities and colleges and schools that get government funding, that's a very it's a very gray area, and it's very strange because Dr. Kieran Moore said that he encourages people to wear masks indoors, but he does not recommend a return to mandatory masks in schools. And to contrast, the Ottawa Catholic school board said they're not going to be bringing back mask mandates. They respect individual choice, and they said that they're going to be treading, any school board that brings back mask mandates are treading on very dangerous ground. And Jason Kenney made that clear in Alberta that businesses who still continue to require the vaccine passport and masks better, or it was maybe Scott Moe, said that businesses and individual organizations that require the mask and mandates, vaccine mandates, still are treading on dangerous grounds and better have legal counsel, because they don't have the protection from the government anymore. So I just don't understand. We're supposedly in the sixth wave, and masks and vaccines maybe they haven't prevented the previous wave. So how is it going to prevent another wave? So it just, these people are bent on control, and especially when it comes to children, they're not very vulnerable, and most people have already had the vaccine. So I don't know what they're so worried about.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Yes, we are in this unofficial or official, I don't know if it's been declared, sixth wave. I think it has been. Yet now we have no mandates, and I'm against these kinds of mandates. So I'm happy about that. Obviously, I'm not happy about people getting sick. But I do have concerns with this mandate, this new masking mandate. They said there are very few exemptions, and while it's kind of loosely being enforced, there will be communication with the parents. There's a lot of this kind of coercion into, your kids should wear the mask because then we're gonna have conversations with you or talk to the child. It seems a little underhanded to me. What do you think, Brock?
The problem seems to be that the goalposts are always shifting. It's one thing to allow family or parent or child choice. This is being forced on the families, and it's not got any backup from the health officials. And all the way along, everyone said follow the science. And now the people that want to keep the masks in the school district aren't following the science. They're enforcing it on the school children. Many children are wearing masks in jurisdictions where it's not mandatory. This teachers, in some cases in this Ottawa district, say they're not going to wear masks. So it's a whole bunch of contradictory, conflicting arguments being put out there. And I think that that's adding to the confusion in society.
Let's talk about the vaccine, because I don't see that a vaccine mandate is coming to the schools. It wasn't before. I don't think that argument is being revived yet. Maybe we could see what happens in the future. But there's a new vaccine available, and I want to talk about this. It's called Novavax. And this is now being distributed across the country to those 18 and up in various jurisdictions. And so there is some suggestion that for persons who were, and I hate using this phrase, but vaccine hesitant, folks who didn't want the vaccine. Some suggest they didn't want it because it was mRNA technology. And we don't want that. That's too experimental. There are too many concerns with that technology. So we'd prefer something more traditional. Novavax isn't mRNA. Maybe if, we still want people to get vaccinated, if this is the government, thought process, let's offer this vaccine and perhaps they'll take it. Hannah, do you think that we will see an uptake with this new vaccine offered because it isn't our mRNA?
Potentially, maybe by a small percentage, but I mean, we already have extremely high vaccination rates here in Canada, and the people who have decided they're not going to get the vaccine, majority of them are not going to get it, and they never will, and that's their choice, and it should always be a freedom of choice. So yes, this vaccine does not use the mRNA technology; it uses more traditional vaccine technology, but there's also still the potential aspects of aborted fetal cells being used in the testing and production, and for some people, that's something they're never going to be comfortable with, and that is their conscience, that's their choice, and they shouldn't be punished for that. So I just don't know why there's still the push to get that small percentage get vaccinated. Like they're going to die on this hill. They already have, they've already lost a lot. And so just leave them alone, go on with life.
Brock, 15 seconds.
The reason that these people are unvaccinated still is that the government hasn't offered them a correct option. This vaccine might be one of them as they move forward. Maybe nasal sprays are other options, and the government needs to improve how they try and persuade the 10% or so that aren't vaccinated to get across that finish line for them.
Okay, we'll be right back in a few moments. Welcome back. Let's pivot now to a new topic, very controversial one. I don't know why it should be controversial, but it is. Welcome to our society. There seems to be a large spike of female inmates who are presently pregnant at an all-female facility in New Jersey. And folks are saying, well, how is this possible? Well, Hannah, why don't you share with us, how is it possible that females are becoming pregnant in a female prison?
Yes, in this prison in New Jersey, there's about 800 women in the prison, and there's about 27 of those people are transgender. And in New Jersey, they recently passed legislation saying that in order for a transgender woman to enter a women's prison, they don't even have to go through surgery. Transgender women are biological men still. And so this particular individual who's impregnated 2 women in the prison still very clearly is a biological man. And obviously, because now 2 of these women are pregnant, if people want to be transgender, that's their choice, but they should not be allowed into women's only spaces. They should not be allowed in women's only prisons. And there have been certain organizations that have been, raising awareness, saying that there's going to be lots more pregnancies. There's going to be more, sexual assaults, more abuse of guards, that type of thing. So it's causing a lot of issues, and it's putting vulnerable women at risk in these facilities where they can't escape. Like you're stuck there, right? So there's a lot of issues with that.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's sexual assaults in both male prisons and female prisons. But you're right, you have this all-female space, and, and I'm going to be very clear, I assume that there is no allowance for sexual activity within a prison. I don't believe that's allowed. You're not allowed to engage with each other. So clearly these people are either doing it knowingly or they're being raped, which both are problematic and going against the rules. Yes, this is a new rule that New Jersey has passed, allowing trans women, so biological men who now identify as women, into the prison. Do you think they should have been a bit more strict about what criteria a trans woman needs to meet or what benchmark they need to meet before they enter the general population at an all-female prison, Brock?
I think part of your challenge here is that New Jersey's done a terrible job here. Their prisons are poorly run. It shows their governor barely got reelected in a strong Democrat state. And part of this seems to be there's a lack of consultation before things move forward. There's division between two left groups, the ACLU and the prison staff union, where they disagree on how transgendered people should be warehoused in these prisons. I think that's part of the challenge, is that consultation was lacking and they just moved ahead with no real thought of how the consequences will play out. And we're seeing a rise in assaults in the women's prison, and I guess in this case, a few pregnancies as well.
Now, I know in Canada, there are situations where this has already happened, that there are trans women in female prisons. Do you anticipate we could see similar things here in Canada, Hannah?
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at the work that Cause Bar is doing here in Canada, they're an organization that are advocating for women's only spaces. They list on their website a number of occurrences of abuse that have already happened in women's prison. And, biological men, being in women's prisons, sexually assaulting, continuing their pattern of abuse, that type of thing. And in Canada as well, after Justin Trudeau came into power, I think in 2017, it was changed so that these men don't even have to go through surgeries in order to enter these prisons. They literally can say, I'm a woman today, put some makeup on, put some, grow out their hair like this guy in the prison in New Jersey, and then be asked to be transferred to a women's prison. Probably have to go through, a psychological test or whatever, but it's obviously not hard to fake those. And now they're, having the time of their life in women's only prisons, which is, we're only going to see more of these issues. And also, there's a lot of women calling out and raising concerns about this, but then there's a lot of backlash that they suffer, which is definitely not pro-woman in my opinion.
Now, Hannah, look, I could see that there'd be some men who will game the system and they just want to, go into the women's prison and, perhaps they're feigning being trans. But there are some folks who really believe that they are trans women. What is the solution for folks like that? Maybe there just is a general trans prison where trans women can go and then make a third option.
Absolutely. And I think that, obviously that's going to cost our government more money, but our government already wastes money on lots of interesting things. So yes.
Well, maybe the new Trudeau truck tax could be used to fund that kind of thing.
Yes, our government seems to have endless money to throw around on new harebrained projects. But yeah, absolutely, there has to be a separate space. If these people want to identify as such, they can have their own separate space.
Okay,
absolutely.
We've got to go. We're out of time. Thank you both so very much.
Thank you.
Well, lots of controversy. Obviously, we'll keep our tabs on what's happening with Elon Musk and Twitter, and of course, the trans women in all female prisons as well. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.